right. Well, I am so glad that you're here this morning. I know that you have an option to not be here. I'm aware of that. And as far as being somewhere and not being somewhere, it's exponentially easier to not be somewhere than it is to be somewhere. So I'm glad that you're here. All right. And as far as being an adult goes, there's probably no greater feeling to an adult than needing to be somewhere and canceling your plans and staying home. That is like euphoria for an adult. Remember when you were a kid and plans got canceled and you went, "Oh man." As an adult, when they get canceled, you're like, "You mean we're staying home?" It's just the exact opposite. So I know that you had the option to not come, and I'm so glad that you're here. So having said that, we'll go ahead and dive in with what God has for us this morning. We are on our very final puzzle piece. Puzzle piece number 4. If you would take your bulletins this morning and open it up, there are a couple things I want to show you as we get started. Puzzle piece number 4. If you'll notice this morning, we are going to be in Joshua chapter 2. We have to take just a moment, I think, this morning and just kind of reflect. Let's reflect for a moment as we're getting started on all that God has done. You know, this is our final service in this room, and God's done some really neat things here, and I'm so thankful for what He's doing. And I want you to also kind of just notice this morning that I believe what God is doing over at Deerfield is He's allowing us here to be kind of a seed that's about to get planted in a community. And this is really for our church and for what we're trying to accomplish. This is really our first big move like this, to where God is taking what we now consider to be our church family. All of our legal papers are way, way behind us as far as the effort that we've done. We're still waiting for some of those to be finalized, but the amount of effort that you guys have put in from setting everything up and tearing everything down and giving faithful in your tithes and offerings, and we've just to kind of recap, every single thing that you see here we've purchased. Everything that Dan's playing on back there's been purchased, and God has just allowed us to have a sound system and all these things that are a benefit that make things easier for us. Enclosed trailer, we bought that in cash. That's a big deal. You know, getting all those things done are a big deal. We've got T-shirts we call our own. We've got outreach material. You know, every Sunday we get a bulletin that, you know, looks like we kind of know what we're doing, and you know, we can trick people. That's the whole point here, you know. And God's done all these things, and I find myself kind of, I guess, this morning reflecting as we find ourselves in the very last service in this room. And I'm thankful for this room, but I am really excited for next week. I think that building will help us tremendously. And I kind of look at this sermon that we're doing right now to be a source of great encouragement for me. And this morning, the topic of our 4th puzzle piece is going to be on the character of Rahab in Joshua chapter 2. I don't know about you, but Rahab and those that are in the Bible that are a lot like Rahab, I find a tremendous source of comfort from the realistic ways the Bible is written. You know, part of something that I do, this actually doesn't even, I never include any of this information in the way that I preach. But something I just enjoy doing is when I know what passage I'm going to preach on, I usually go on YouTube and just start looking at sermons and listening to them. It's just a way to get my mind firing. Usually when I do that, I just go, why did they preach it that way? That's usually what I end up doing, which I guess maybe I'm using what not to use. I don't know. But I would say probably out of the 4 or 5 sermons I listened to this week on this topic, every single one of them prepared Rahab and said it like this: God could even use a harlot. God could even use a prostitute. And I don't find the Bible saying God's not looking at all the beautiful, squeaky clean saints and looking at with Rahab behind him and saying, I'm so powerful I can even use her. I think that's missing the whole point. The point is, I'm Rahab. That's the point. The point is that God will use anybody who's willing to align themselves with his will. That's the point. If he wants to show his power off, he can make a mountain just kind of go up and down and say, look, that's not even trying. The Bible says he breathes out stars. I don't think he's showing off by using Rahab. And I think that we get on our high horse sometimes and we say, I'm so good, it's obvious why God uses me, but wow, he can even use Rahab. That's how I hear this preached. And I think that's missing the whole point of the beauty of the story of Rahab. Because guys, I'm Rahab. And you know what's amazing is you are too. I have a question for you this morning as we get started. And I just want to know, if you had two places, and this might sound like it has a really easy answer, but I want you to really contemplate it. So just in your own heart, your own mind before God, if you had two choices, my question here is, what is the most beneficial way or beneficial place to be at in life? Let's say that. What's the most beneficial place to be at in life? I'm going to give you two options. And let's just suppose you had to choose one of these two, because these two will at least just get you to think. Your first option is for everybody that's around you to know that you live this really squeaky clean lifestyle, okay? And when they see you, they know that you're Sunday school teacher material. They want you to babysit their kids. I mean, they just look at you. You've got a very public prayer life and Bible time. And it's just, you just do, let's say it this way, because this is kind of what I've always heard. You do the right thing. Man, there's absolutely nothing, there's nothing dirty around the edges about this lifestyle. If you live in here, it is everybody has a great thing to say about you. They think positively of you. Let's just say over here, I'm going to put it in really small letters because it's just not flashy. It's just simply God's will. But man, a lot of people think you're an idiot. Man, a lot of people can't believe that you said that. A lot of people cannot believe that you used to be that. A lot of people think that they just can't even imagine that you're that kind of person and you're going to dare to stand up and proclaim the name of Jesus. But I want you to understand something. God's will here doesn't mean that you, and we take, let me say it a different way. Instead of will, let me say it this way. Mission, is that a better word? God's mission. Let's just say you're on board with God's mission. Let me give you an example, guys. If you were in the military and you're a soldier in the military, and there's a war being fought, because there's a war being fought in Christendom, right? There's a war being fought for the church, the battle of souls, the battle of the mind. Let's just say this morning you're a soldier in the military and there's a war being fought and the generals are strategizing about the war and they're strategizing on how they're going to win the war. And you're the worst soldier in the military. You never get up on time. You're constantly getting in trouble. You don't make your bed. And you decide, you know what? I'm going to change. I'm going to be a part of this military. I'm going to be part of the mission of what we're trying to accomplish. And you finally wake up one day and you see your commanding officer and you smile on his face. You go, "Good morning, sir." And he goes, "What are you smiling about?" You said, "Because I feel fantastic for where I am right now." They go, "Why?" And you said, "Because I am finally a part of the mission of what's going on in the Army, and I should have made this decision a long time ago, and I feel so good about it." And the commanding officer looks you in the eyes and says, "What do you know about the mission of what's going on in this thing?" You said, "I'll tell you this much. Man, I woke up this morning and I shaved. I made my bed, and I even straightened my belt, and I was on time for all of those things, sir. And I'm so excited to be a part of the mission of what this Army is doing." Now, would you think that's odd? See, that would be like when you wake up in the morning and you read your Bible and pray and post it on Facebook. "So good to do my devotions today." And you go to the Lord and you say, "Lord, it is so good to be back. I'm so excited to be part of this will of yours." It feels good, really. Same thing. What I just said are the two same things. No. See, soldier, you should have been making your bed every day anyway. You're supposed to be getting up. That's just part of being here. Hey, listen, follower of Christ, we're supposed to be speaking to him and praying and reading our Bible. That's just what we do as followers of him. That doesn't mean you have an inside scoop on the mission. Because, sometimes the people that are here, they're dirty and smelly. Sometimes these people, I think I'm here. I don't think I live here. Because I often don't do the right thing. And I often get ashamed. And I have to call people and apologize. And you know what? Serving Christ is dirty. It's not clean. It's got rough edges on it. But God is looking for people that say, Lord, I may mess up, but this is what I know. You're the best thing that I've ever seen. And I'm on your side. That's Rahab. This is where Rahab was. And for the rest of eternity, her title is Rahab the prostitute. Can you imagine? I want to show you in your bulletin real quickly. The big idea of this passage is just simply this. God is capable of accomplishing his will under any circumstance. Do you believe that? Do you believe that this morning? God is capable of accomplishing his will under any circumstance? Here's what I'm proposing for you this morning. God will use you. You say, you don't know me. God will use you. Just for emphasis, I put this in parentheses. Yes, even though he knows everything you've done. If you submit to align yourself with his will. This caveat of aligning with his mission, what he's actively doing. I don't want to spend the whole time on illustrations, but let me just real quickly say it this way. What if in the very middle of this city, there was a giant open field in the middle of this city? Let's just say there's a giant open field, there's cars going by everywhere, and a big grass area with a fence around it, and it just said Jesus' house. It's where Jesus lives. And every day Jesus is out there waving at people and waving them in. Come here, come here. And it's Jesus' place. He's trying to call people in. And let's say every day you go past there, you think, I love him so much. He's going, come here. Finally, one day you decide to stop, and you notice right away there's a lot of other people that have stopped, and there's people on the corner, and they say they love Jesus too, and they're over there, and they're singing the most beautiful songs about him. And that's what they do. Those people just sing the whole time, and they say, we just love to worship, and this is our thing. There's another group over here along the way, and they make signs, and they paint for him, and they paint for Jesus, and that's just what they do. And you go and talk to those groups, and they're so inspiring. And they say, we stopped here in the 70s and have never left since. We've been singing for him ever since. And Jesus is just by the entrance going, come here, come here. But we don't go talk to him yet. We go talk to the sign people. We see the people that are over there painting for Jesus. We say, tell me about your story. And they go, oh, ever since we pulled in here at Jesus' place, our lives have been so much better. And we're just kind of confused because no one's talking to Jesus. Everybody's talking about him and everybody's doing something for him, but nobody's talking to him. And you're like, this is weird. And so you go up to Jesus as the gatekeeper. You go, hey, I've just been hearing so much about you. Can I talk to you? And he goes, of course, that's why I'm here. He said, can I be a part of what you're doing? And he goes, I don't know if you want to be. Not many people want to be. I said, well, there's tons of people out here. What is it that you're a part of? He says, well, you see my big open field? You go, yeah? He says, you see those real heavy rocks on the end of my property? You go, yeah? He says, man, all I want people to do is just simply pick that rock up and carry it to the other side. You go, but there's no one doing that. He's like, I know. People love to talk about me. But they don't just want to just do the very one thing I'm asking them to do. He said, Jesus, I'm just so confused. There are a ton of people out here. How come not one person is doing it? He goes, that's my mission. I want those rocks to get from there to the. That's all I want to do. And he says, and I'll help you. I will give you the strength to do it. and I will give you the peace to do it if you would humble yourself to go do that. You're like, that is a no-brainer. And so you go over there and you bend down, you try to pick up these heavy rocks for Jesus, and you realize all the other people that are looking at you start laughing at you. What is he doing? See, that's the difference. That's the difference between here and here. Can I just say, I've just got to a place in my life where I don't want to hurt my testimony needlessly, but I don't give a flying flip what anybody thinks. I just don't, man. I think we should have that boldness for Christ and say, Lord, what's your mission? Help me be a part of it. If it's picking up rocks, I don't care if everyone's laughing. If you tell me to do that, do it. Did you know if you open up your Bible right now and try to get a mission statement for a church, there's not much to choose from. It doesn't mention a missions conference. It doesn't mention a banquet hall. It doesn't mention a sound system. It doesn't mention bulletins. We're really good about doing everything except for what he says. He said, feed those that are hungry, find the widows and the fatherless, clothe those that are naked, give people water that are thirsty. This is literally the listing for Matthew 25. He separates nations based on what I just said in Matthew 25. I think that before True Grace does anything, we should say, Lord, can we talk to you? What do you want us to do? And if he says, I want you to go over there, and I just want you to throw some gospel seed out. Just throw some gospel seed out. That's all I want you to do. We say, yes, sir. You know why Rahab is a mystery to people? Because they're missing the whole point that she, for 1 second, said, I'll go move the rock. And we go, look, he even uses prostitutes. No, you guys are all on the outside singing about him, and she's lifting up the rock. That's what's going on in this passage. Joshua chapter 2. Joshua the son of Nun sent out Shittim 2 men to spy secretly. Showing a little bit of wisdom from last time, if you remember. He sent out 2 once before, sent out actually more than that, but they came back with a negative report, and it was devastating to people. So this time, as Joshua grows, he's bringing out just 2. They went out and they came out to a harlot's house named Rahab, and they lodged there. Verse 2. It was told to the king of Jericho, saying, behold, there came men in thither to the night of the children of Israel to search out the country. And the king, verse 3, of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country. It's important to note that the Hebrew here, more than likely, I wouldn't be totally dogmatic about this, but I think this is probably true. It probably indicates here that Rahab is also an innkeeper, that she probably is running some sort of an inn, a bed and breakfast, if you will, and she's also known in this context very clearly. There's no question here of the harlot of the town. The woman took the 2 men in verse 4 and hid them and said, thus, there came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. She's like, I don't know where they went. Verse number 5, it came to pass about the time of the shutting of the gate when it was dark. She's saying the story. She says, when it was about to, gate was shutting, the men went out. Whether the men went, I wot not, I don't know. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. She says, about time of dark, I looked over and the gate was about to shut. Man, I saw those 2 guys just running out of here. You guys hurry, you'll be able to get them. Now, another thing that I noticed from listening to people teach this, and you can look at this in commentaries, almost across the board, it's assumed that her lie here is a negative thing. And I heard so many people teach this. They said, in spite of her lying, God still used her. Okay, hang on a second. James chapter 2, verse 25 says she was justified by her works right here. Whereas Abraham was justified because he believed God, Rahab was justified by her works recorded in this passage right here. James 2:25. You can check it out. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to use you as an example, okay? Okay, so I go over to Kevin's house. I'm an intruder. You don't know me. All right, not good. Already not good. And I look at Kevin and I say, tell me, just before I get there, he hears me and he has all his family go in one room. Okay? And I go to him and I say, tell me where your family is, because I'm going to do them harm. Tell me where your family is. And Kevin says, you know what? They were here, but they all just went to the store. They're not here anymore. This is exactly what Rahab just did. This is a war time. So my question would be, is that wrong? Would that be wrong? Would you say, I can't believe he lied to the intruder? I mean, Kevin, I knew he was a bad guy, but I didn't know he was a liar. No one would say that. Why? Because you don't owe anybody the truth that wishes to kill you. You're under no obligation at that point, have some kind of upstanding moral code, to tell your enemy that wants to kill you the truth. Rahab did nothing wrong. It says in James chapter 2, verse 25, she was justified by this. Okay, so she says, hey, they were here. They ran out before the gate. Verse number 6. But she had brought them up to the roof of the house, hid them under the stalks of flax, which she laid in order upon the roof. The men pursued after them the way of the Jordan unto the fords, and as soon as they were, which pursued after them, were gone out, they shut the gate. So here we see this incredible, by the way, Jericho, this city, is an incredible walled city, and this is strategically part of the conquest of Joshua. I wish we had more time to go into this part, but Joshua is using the takedown of Jericho very strategically. He has to take out Jericho in his conquest of the promised land. So he's coming into this place here, and she says, go pursue after them. The men run after these two spies, supposedly, and the gate shuts behind them. Now in verse number 8, Rahab then turns to the men and begins speaking to them. But I want to point out something real quickly on your bulletin as we move on. God will use you, my proposition. God will use you. Yes, even though he knows everything you've done, if you submit to align yourself with his will. So the question would be, if I have the proper proposition to you, and by the way, this is what helps me to know if my sermons are biblical to you. If I give you a proper proposition, you should be able to answer both how and why all throughout my text. If you can't do that, then I have the complete wrong text. This forces me to ask questions that are pertinent to what we're doing, just so you are with me. So let me ask you this question. How did God do this for Rahab from the text? How did Rahab align herself with God's will? Let me answer that in one way. In verses number 4 and 5, she identified herself with Israel, so much so that she put herself in danger. Let me give you a little quick background before we dive into this too much more. You got to understand that Jericho was a very, very wicked place. Jericho had a lot of different belief systems with a ton of different little g gods. And there was a lot of pagan worship that was going on in Jericho. And they believed in all sorts of gods. A god for the mountain, a god for the hills, a god for the rivers, a god for this and that. At the moment that Rahab, in verses number 4 and 5, as soon as she identified with Israel and began to put her belief into action, she put herself in a great amount of danger. She aligned herself with God's will by identifying with Israel. But I think the greatest thing here is in verses 8 through 11. She identified with or aligned herself with the will of God by her confession. This is what we'll spend the rest of our time on this morning. The confession of Rahab. The confession of Rahab. Look at this closely, if you would, as her attention is now turned to the children of Israel lying under the flax. She looks at them as the men had just ran out the gate. And in verse number 8, she looks at them and says, before they were laid down, she came up to them in the roof. She said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land. Here's her confession. I have it divided up several different ways. Here's the first way I want you to understand that she said it. She said, I know. You know what this means? This means that Rahab, a prostitute in a pagan place, did not have access to a local church, guys. She said, I know. This means that she's been thinking about this a lot. What did you know, Rahab? What did you know? What have you been thinking about, Rahab? What's going on inside of your heart? She said, here's what I know. I know this. I know that the Lord, let's stop. How did she know that name? This is the name Yahweh. Capital O-L-O-R-D, all capitals. This is the name Yahweh. It's the same word that God uses in Genesis 2 with Adam we've talked about before. This is his personal name. This is not Elohim. Elohim means creator. It's like calling me Mr. Media. Or actually, Elohim would be like calling me man. It's the most generic name you can have. But she didn't say Elohim. She said Yahweh. She knew the personal name of the Israeli God. How did she know his name? She said, I want you guys to know something. I know this to be true. And I just risked my life because of my confession I'm about to say to you. That of all the things that I've done in my life and the way that I live my life, and I'm perceiving what's going on here with the king of Jericho, and my family lives here, and I want you to know something. I know something about this. That your personal God is great. She goes on with her confession. She says, I know the Lord has given you the land. Let's stop there for a second. She says, I know that your God, the God of Israel, is a personal God. And I know he acts on your behalf. You know why that's a significant statement? Because Rahab had never seen any God act on anybody's behalf ever before. Because they're dead. And she says, I know that not only do you know who your God is, and not only does he know who you are, but I happen to know that he does things for you. How many people do you know in your workplace or in your extended family that need to understand that truth? That not only is God real, not only does he know who I am, but he acts on my behalf. Rahab said, I know this to be true. What a confession. Verse number 9, she says, that your Lord has given you the land and that your terror is fallen upon us. Rahab comes to the conclusion that it is a fearful thing to call the Lord Yahweh of Israel your enemy. So Rahab comes together and says, I don't want him to be my enemy. Your terror has fallen upon us, that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. End of verse 9. She said, people have no strength to stand up against him. Look at the example she uses. Verse 10. We have heard how the Lord dried up water of the Red Sea for you. She's saying in verse number 10 that when you are faced with an impossible task, when there's an ocean in the way, your God just dries it up. She said, I heard about that. When you came to two kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, Sihon and Og, you utterly destroyed them. Rahab is saying what she's heard. She's saying, you know what I hear? I hear that when you guys are boxed in, and on every side is enemy, but at one side there's a sea. Your God dries up the water. When you guys have no escape, and there's powerful kings in front of you that all of us are scared of, for you, he just utterly destroys them. And Rahab said on this day, she said, I'd rather die today, knowing that I'm trying to align myself with the King of Israel, the one true God, than to spend one more minute ever being his enemy. She concludes in verse number 11, as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melt. Neither did there any courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above, in heaven beneath. Why did she say it this way? Because remember, the gods of Jericho were the gods of the sun, the gods of the mountains, the gods of the rivers, the gods of the trees. She said, not like your God. Your God is the God of everything in the heavens and everything beneath it. This is Rahab's confession. See, it's not that God is so powerful he could even use a prostitute. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that all of us are Rahab, and you have an opportunity in your life to do the mission. That's up to you. See, I know this. There is almost zero value in this. I've been that. There is no value in that. Because as soon as you get one blemish that somebody thinks is there, whether it's true or not, you no longer have that. It's worthless. There's no value in it. You know where there's a ton of value? Right there. In verse number 12, they have a covenant they make with Rahab. She says, I pray you swear unto me by the Lord. I've shown you kindness. Show kindness to my father's house. Which, you know, another way that she aligned herself with the will of God is her immediate love for other people. Rahab began to plead for the safety of others. They said yes to her. They have a covenant with her. You guys know the story. I'm not going to teach you the rest, but turn, if you would, over to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. Maybe one part of the story that is less well known is who Rahab ends up marrying. Does anybody know who Rahab ends up marrying? It's a less well-known part of the story. With your hand, go ahead and hold Hebrews 11, and we're going to turn one other place, actually. If you can hold your place there, and then with your other hand, turn over to the last chapter of Ruth. The last chapter of Ruth in the Old Testament. Last chapter of Ruth. And in the last chapter of Ruth, you're going to find something incredible that you just absolutely just don't hear taught very much. And that is who she marries. Ruth marries a guy named Salmon. That's how they say it. You might look at it and say salmon. It's a salmon. That's how it's spelled, but it's called Salmon. I want you to notice, everybody understands the significance to the book of Ruth, I think, at this point. You know, Ruth is the link that we needed to have to understand where Jesus came from. Ruth is the one that fills in the gaps to help us understand where David came from, and he's the offspring of David. But just before that, look at the end of the book of Ruth. Look at verse number 18. Now these are the generations of Pharez. Pharez begat Hezron. Hezron begat Ram. I'm sorry, verse 19. Hezron begat Ram. Ram begat Amminadab. Amminadab begat Nahshon. Nahshon begat Salmon. Salmon begat Boaz. Wait a second. Rahab is the mom of Boaz. Let's read on. Boaz begat Obed. Wait a second. Rahab is the grandma of Obed? Let's read on. Obed begat Jesse. Hang on. Rahab is the great-grandmother of Jesse? Let's read on. Jesse begat David. Wait a second. Rahab is the great grandma of King David? Was God showing off how powerful he was to use the town prostitute? No. Because, see, before we get on that high horse, we have to understand that our best day is disgusting to God. It says that our righteousness are as filthy rags. He wasn't showing off his power. He was just clearly saying, hey, when I say to move the rock from one side of the yard to the other, whoever wants to be blessed by me, come on in and move some rocks. Get on board with my mission and I'll use you. I don't care who you are. Anybody can. Pass out a tract. Open your mouth. Pray for somebody. Do something for me and I'll be with you. You'll be on my team and I'll be on your team. Anybody who wants to. Anybody who wants to. In Matthew chapter 1, we won't take the time to turn there, but we have the genealogy, the kingly line of Jesus. Rahab is a part of that. Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11 goes to the history of Israel. Verse number 30, by faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. By faith the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, and she had received the spies with peace. With lies? No, with peace. She made it to this incredibly short list of the heroes of the faith. We call it the Hall of Faith chapter 11 of Hebrews. Rahab's in it. I want you to know something. And Revelation tells me that Satan, day and night, is accusing me before Jesus, saying that I'm guilty. Every day he's doing that. You know why you're a terrible father? You know why you're the worst mom ever? You know why you're a horrible grandma and grandpa? Or you know why you couldn't succeed more in finances? And this hate and this hate and this negativity and this crud that's being thrown on us every single second. And we have the nerve to sit here and read the Bible and say, wow, God's showing his power by what he can do with even a prostitute. No, that's missing the whole point. The point is, I am filthy. The point is that I needed a Savior. The point is that maybe we need to understand how God thinks and sees people. And Satan is saying, Ken is so guilty. Man, he is so guilty. Look at what Ken's doing. Day and night he does this to me. You know what I say? He's right. He's right. That's the one thing Satan's not lying about, is how guilty I am before Jesus. But he kind of forgot the refrain to the whole thing, didn't he? Which is Jesus saves. That's the refrain to the Rahab story. Is she a harlot? Yeah, man, I cannot change the text. She is. But I got great news. God is a great God, and he'll use anybody that comes to him. And his mission is open for all people. And he'll use you in a powerful way in the craziness of this life. If we would simply just align ourselves with his mission, with his will, and say, Lord, what are we doing today? He says, this might sound crazy. You say, Lord, I don't care what it sounds like. Just give me a task. He says, that's all I'm looking for. Maybe this morning you've been beat up on your past, or you've been beat up on your thought life, and you feel less than worthy to serve the Lord. Can I just tell you, you're not less than worthy. Because Jesus makes us worthy. It's by his righteousness we're saved. All of us are just brothers and sisters going, man, isn't he great? That's all we are. The story is not that God is so powerful he can even use a prostitute. Nope. The story is that one person who happened to be a prostitute was willing to align herself with the current mission of God by getting Israel into the promised land. And she will forever be remembered for going against the grain and being the one person in her area that said, I don't care what happens to me. I don't care if you kill me. I would rather be dead and identify with the God of Israel than to go one more day on in my lifestyle of being his enemy. Aren't you glad this morning that you can say you're no longer, I hope, the enemy of God? I'm so thankful this morning that I can say, I know I'm definitely not the guy on the left. I sure don't want to hurt my testimony for no reason. That's not what I'm saying. But man, I crave this side. I crave it. I hope God puts a fire in your heart. Say, Lord, give me my mission. Help me line up with what you have for me. And when he shows it to you, do it the very best that you can.